There is a kind of cargo nobody wants to sign for, and there is a kind of man who signs for it anyway. I have been that man for 41 years. My name is Eli Marsh, and I run loads off the gantry at Tesrin Reach, which is a transfer ring bolted to the dark between three trade lanes that don't agree about much except that they all need somewhere to stop. I have a tug called the Hod. She is old, she is slow, and she has never once let me down, which is more than I can say for most of the species I have hauled for. I tell you this so you understand the kind of man I am before I tell you what the Vael did and what came of it. I am not a hero. I am a hauler. The difference is that a hero wants the story told and a hauler wants the load settled. By the end of this you will have to decide for yourself which of those got the Vael through the worst night of their lives. I have my own opinion, but I keep it the way I keep everything quiet and in writing. The Vael came to the Reach the way the Vael come to everywhere, which is as though the place had been waiting its whole existence for them to arrive and validate it. Their host ship was the sort of vessel that costs more than a moon and does less. All gilt spine and mirrored flank, not a weld seam visible anywhere, the kind of hull that has never been touched by a working hand because working hands are not permitted near it. It slid into the high berth and sat there gleaming, and the Reach's lights bent around it like the whole ring was bowing. I was on the gantry deck at the time, sleeves rolled, going over the night's manifests with my second, a steady woman named Petra Voss who has hauled with me 11 years and is worth 4 of any officer the Vael ever commissioned. We watched the host ship dock the way you watch weather. You don't expect it to do you any favors. You just note which way it's blowing. They'll want something offloaded, Petra said. They always do. They'll want it done by us, and they'll want it done like we're not there. They always do that too. What you have to understand about the Vael is that their whole civilization is a ladder, and every rung of it is somebody standing on somebody else's shoulders and refusing to look down. They have castes the way other peoples have, whether constant, total, and not up for discussion. At the top are the high, who do nothing with their hands because doing things with your hands is, to them, a kind of staining. Below the high are the lesser ranks, and below those are more ranks, and at the very bottom, beneath even mention, are the ones they call the unranked, who do all the work and whom the high will not look at, not out of cruelty exactly, but because to a Vael looking at the unranked is like looking too long at a drain. There is a thing down there. You know it's necessary. You'd rather not. And then there is us. Humans don't fit on their ladder at all, which troubles them because everything has to fit. They solve the problem the way they solve every problem by deciding we were unranked, not their unranked, a foreign, lesser, faintly distasteful equivalent. Hauler things, scrap creatures. We carried their waste, so we were of their waste, and that was the end of the conversation as far as they were concerned. It never bothered me much. A man who needs an alien aristocracy to think well of him has chosen a hard road. I have a tug, a deck, a crew, and 41 years of loads landed soft. The Vael could think whatever they liked. Mostly I just wished they'd think it somewhere I wasn't trying to work. The summons came down the line about an hour after they berthed. It wasn't a request. The Vael don't request. It was a notice, formatted in 3 languages and condescending in all of them, informing the local servitor element, that was us, that a consignment was to be offloaded from the host ship, that the consignment was of a spoil classification, and that it was to be removed promptly, quietly, and without contamination of the upper berths. Petra read it over my shoulder and made a small sound in her throat. Spoil. They're dumping garbage. Looks like. From a ship that clean, what's a ship that clean even generate? It was a good question, and I wanted on the record that she asked it before any of the rest happened, because later the Vael would behave as though no one could possibly have known, and the truth is one of us asked the right question in the first 10 minutes, and nobody up the ladder thought a hauler's question was worth answering. We took the Hod up to the host ship's low transfer port, which is where ships like that keep the door they don't want guests to see. The high don't come down to the transfer port. The high don't come anywhere near where a load changes hands. So we were met by a mid-rank Vael officer, the kind they use to talk to creatures they won't talk to themselves. He had the long, jointed frame they all have, the chitin and velvet look, that strange iridescence across the plating of his face that shifts color depending on which of their many moods of disdain he is currently entertaining. His name, he informed us, the way you'd inform a freight scanner of your account number, was Sub-Steward Korath. "You are the hauler," Korath said. He did not look at me when he said it. He looked at a point about a foot to the left of my head, which is where Vael look when they are addressing something they'd rather not acknowledge has a face. "I'm the loadmaster," I said. "Eli Marsh. This is my second Petra Voss." "You are the hauler," he said again, as though I'd tried to upsell him. "The consignment is within, spoil class. You will remove it to your scow and dispose of it by whatever methods your kind employ. The transfer is to be complete before the next watch. You will not address the upper decks. You will not require assistance. The matter is beneath the notice of this vessel and will remain so." "Happy to take it off your hands," I said. "I'll need the spoil sheet." The plating across his face went a shade I'd come to recognize as the Vael equivalent of a man being asked something faintly disgusting at a dinner party. "The what?" "The spoil sheet, the manifest. What's in the load, how old it is, what state it's in, what it was before it was spoil. Standard. I sign for anything, I sign for it knowing what it is." "It is spoil," Korath said, with the patience of a creature explaining color to a stone. "Its prior nature is not the concern of a hauler. Its nature now is refuse. You remove refuse. You do not catalog it. To catalog refuse is to dwell on it, and to dwell on refuse is," he searched briefly for a word low enough, "it is your function, not ours. Take it. Go." Now I want to be fair to the Vael, because I have learned over a long life that the people who hurt you worst are rarely doing it for the reasons you'd assume. Korath was not being lazy. From where he stood, providing me a spoil sheet would have meant acknowledging that the contents of the refuse mattered, which would have meant acknowledging that the refuse mattered, which would have meant acknowledging that he, a sub-steward of the Vael, had spent his afternoon thinking carefully about garbage. To his caste, that is closer to a sin than a clerical lapse. He wasn't withholding the manifest to spite me. He was withholding it to protect his soul. It is a hell of a thing, watching a creature damn a room full of people to keep its hands clean. "I'll do my own assay then," I said. "Petra, get the gear." That gave him pause. The plating flickered. "You will not open the containment." "I'll scan it. Won't crack a seal. Just want to know what I'm hauling next to my crew." "You will remove it as it is, sealed, untouched, uncatalogued." Something underneath the disdain, I'd swear to this, flickered toward unease, the way a man's voice tightens when you ask him a question he's specifically been told not to be asked. "The consignment was sealed by the upper decks. It is not yours to examine. It is yours to be rid of. That is the whole of your involvement and the whole of your worth." And there it was, the whole of your worth. He said it the way you'd swat a fly, not even with anger, just with the mild physical reflex of removing a small irritation from your field of attention. The whole of your worth. Petra, behind me, went still in the particular way she goes still when she's deciding whether to say something that'll cost us the contract. I caught her eye and gave her the look that means let it ride. We've hauled together 11 years. She let it ride. "All right," I said. "Sealed, untouched, gone before next watch. You'll want to step back from the lock, sub-steward. The Hod's grapples kick when they engage, and I'd hate to stain your decking." I'd like to tell you I said that last part innocently. I am 63 years old and I have very little left to gain by lying about small things, so I did not say it innocently. It is the one thing I let myself have, that little stain. Korath flinched back from the lock as though I'd spat, and I brought the grapples in slow and clean and didn't kick the decking at all, and he never knew the difference, and that was enough. We took the consignment. It came across in 9 containment cribs, each about the size of a cargo skiff. sealed in the Vael's mirror-bright casing so you couldn't see a thing inside. They were heavier than they looked, and they sat wrong on the grapples, not the dead, settled weight of true garbage, but a live, sullen weight, the weight of something that hasn't finished being what it is. I have hauled a lot of loads in 41 years. You develop a sense for cargo the way an old farmer develops a sense for sky. These cribs felt like sky before a storm. "Eli," Petra said low on the private channel, once the cribs were stowed in the Hod's belly and the host ship's port had sealed behind us with an audible sound of relief. "These are warm." I felt it. "No, I mean they're warm. I've got the belly probes reading. Crib 3 is running 11 degrees over the others and climbing." I looked at the readout. She was right. 8 of the 9 cribs sat at the cold, even temperature of deep storage. Crib 3 did not. Crib 3 was a slow fever. Garbage does not run a fever. Garbage sits there being garbage. The only loads I've ever hauled that ran a fever were loads that were still doing something, still reacting, still breaking down, still turning whatever they were into whatever they'd be next and giving off heat in the turning. We call it a live load. You don't dump a live load. You settle it. You crib it, you bleed it down slow. You give the reaction somewhere safe to finish. And you do not, under any circumstance, treat it like inert trash, because inert trash does not occasionally decide to become something with an opinion. I had just signed for 9 cribs of spoil, sealed and uncatalogued, on the word of a creature who would rather have damned us than told me what was inside, and one of them was waking up. I want to be honest about what I felt in that moment, because if you've never hauled you might imagine it was fear, and it wasn't, or not yet. What I felt was the particular flat anger of a professional who has been handed a problem by someone who thinks the problem is beneath them. I have felt it 1,000 times. A captain who won't tell you his ship is leaking because admitting the leak is admitting he can't run his ship. A foreman who marks a load light because the heavy fee comes out of his number. People hand you danger wrapped in their own vanity all the time. And the job, the whole job really, under all the lifting and hauling, is to take the danger out of the vanity without making the vanity feel bad about it. Because if you make the vanity feel bad, it will fight you. And you do not have time to fight the vanity and the danger both. "Take us off the ring," I told Petra. "Quarter click, station keeping, clear of the upper berths. I want this thing nowhere near anybody clean while I figure out what it's doing." "You're not going to call it up to the Vael." "I'm going to figure out what it is first. Then I'm going to call it up to the Vael, and they're going to tell me it's beneath their notice. And then I'm going to figure out how to get them to notice it without telling them they were wrong, because a Vael that thinks it was wrong is more dangerous than the load." I rubbed my face. "Get me the assay gear. I'm going to do the spoil sheet they wouldn't give me." We pulled the Hod off the ring and held her steady in the dark, a quarter click out, the host ship gleaming above us, oblivious. 100,000 of the high going about their elevated lives behind a hull no working hand had ever touched. And down in the belly of my old tug, in the cold and the clothes, I put on the heavy gloves and the assay rig, and I went to read a load that nobody up the ladder had thought a hauler needed to read. Crib 3 was hot to the touch through the casing. Not dangerously, not yet warm like a sleeping animal, warm like bread an hour out of the oven. I ran the spectral probe along the seam and let it sip the trace gases bleeding off the casing, because everything bleeds, no matter how well it's sealed. Sealing only slows it. And the probe came back and told me what was inside, and I sat down on an equipment locker and looked at the readout for a while. It was drive medium. Spent drive medium, the catalytic core out of one of the Vael's own engines, the stuff that sits in the heart of a ship like that and does the impossible thing that lets it cross the dark. When it's fresh, it's worth a fortune. When it's done, it's the most patient kind of dangerous there is, because it doesn't stop when you take it out of the engine. It keeps breaking down, slowly over years. It unwinds the strange knots that made it useful. And as it unwinds, it gives off heat and it gives off pressure. And if you let it run free in a sealed container with nowhere to put the heat and the pressure, it eventually decides to give off all of it at once. The Vael hadn't dumped garbage. They'd dumped spent cores out of their own host ship's drive, the way you change the oil. And because handling spent cores is filthy, polluting, beneath the high work, nobody up the ladder had wanted to think about them long enough to settle them properly. They'd been sealed hot and stacked in cribs and parked, and the high had washed their hands, and the cribs had sat in the host ship's low hold for, I checked the decay signature, for a good deal longer than they should have. Long enough for crib 3 to start coming apart. And then a problem had presented itself, the way problems do for people who refuse to look at them. The host ship needed to move or refit, or the hold was wanted for something the high cared about, and suddenly the spoil had to go. So they'd called down to the reach and summoned the local hauler things, the foreign unranked, and handed us 9 cribs of their own decaying engine cores with the instruction to be rid of them quietly and not to catalog them, because to catalog refuse is to dwell on it, and the high do not dwell. They had handed me a slow bomb and forbidden me to look at it, and they had done it not out of malice but out of the same caste pride that wouldn't let Korath meet my eye. To them, the most important fact about those cribs was that touching them was beneath the high. The fact that one of them was getting ready to come apart was, by comparison, a hauler's concern, beneath their notice. I am going to say something now that I have thought about for a long time, and I want it set down plainly. The Vael did not nearly kill themselves because they were stupid. They were not stupid. They were the cleverest, most accomplished, most refined people I have ever hauled for. They nearly killed themselves because they had built a whole civilization on the principle that some work is too low to think about, and then they had filed the most dangerous thing aboard their ship under low work and stopped thinking about it. Their downfall was not ignorance. It was dignity. They were too dignified to look at the one thing that could kill them, so they handed it to the only people on the ring who weren't. I took off the gloves and went forward and told Petra what we were sitting on, and she was quiet for a moment, and then she said the thing I'd been thinking. Crib 3 won't keep till next watch. No, it won't. How long? I'd run the numbers in my head 3 times by then and gotten the same answer each time, which is never a good sign. If it stays sealed and we don't settle it, 6 hours, maybe 8. Then the casing fails and it lets go, and a spent core letting go a quarter click off a hull isn't a bomb exactly. It's worse. It's a flare and a pressure front and a wash of hot medium that'll scour anything it touches and keep scouring. The hod's gone in the first second. The ring takes the front. And the host ship, I stopped. The host ship's clean hull, Petra said slowly, has never been touched by a working hand. So it's never been hardened the way a working hull gets hardened. It's beautiful, it's mirror bright, and it's thin. It's thin, I agreed. It's a show hull. It was built to be looked at by people who'd never have to survive a thing hitting it. I looked up at the gleaming spine of the host ship hanging above us in the dark, 100,000 of the high asleep behind it. If Crib 3 lets go where it is, it doesn't just take the reach. It opens that ship like a tin of fish. We sat with that for a moment, the two of us, in the belly of the hod. So we settle it, Petra said. So we settle it. We've got the gear. We've done it 100 times, and a spent core is a spent core no matter whose engine it came out of. We crib it proper, we bleed it down slow, we give the reaction somewhere safe to finish, and in about 30 hours of careful, filthy, beneath their notice hauler work, Crib 3 goes cold and stays cold, and nobody up the ladder ever has to know how close it came. I started pulling on the heavy gloves again. There's just the one problem. Only one. To settle it, I have to vent Crib 3. Bleed the hot medium off into a settling crib where it can finish reacting somewhere I control. And venting it means the bleed-off hot gas, hot trace, a wash of spent medium has to go somewhere, out into the dark. A controlled plume, low and slow, away from the ring. I looked up at the host ship again. And the only safe vector to vent it, the only direction that doesn't blow it back across the reach or into the lanes, runs straight up past the host ship's lower spine. Close. Closer than they'll like. The plume's harmless, it's spent, it's cold by the time it spreads, but it'll wash their mirror-bright flank with a haze of hauler's spoil, and there is no version of this where the high don't see it happen. Petra started to laugh, then thought better of it. You're telling me the only way to save their ship is to do the one thing they specifically forbade: contaminate the upper berths. Without contamination of the upper berths, I quoted. That was the notice. Sealed, untouched, uncatalogued, and for the love of all that's holy, don't let it touch anything clean. I flexed the heavy gloves and felt the old familiar weight of a load that needed settling settle, in turn, onto me. So before I can save their ship, I have to call up the ladder, past Korath, past whatever's above Korath, all the way to whoever's high enough to authorize a hauler to throw a haze of spoil across the most expensive hull in 3 lanes. And I have to get a creature that won't look at my face to give a hauler permission to do the one thing it told the hauler never to do. They'll never say yes. They'll never say yes, I agreed to that, so I won't ask them that. I keyed the comms and started bringing up the host ship's hail channel, the formal one, the one the unranked are forbidden to use. I'm going to ask them something else.